Officer Malik Mitchell shouted, "You're defending a thief! You're all trash!" as he kicked the black woman who had just entered the courtroom, completely unaware she was Lena Carter, the newly sworn-in chief of police, barely hours into her role. She hadn't come to ask for permission or plead for mercy. She was there to expose the deeply corrupt system Mitchell had manipulated and controlled for years. The moment her name was called, the entire courtroom froze, and for the first time, Mitchell's usual cold confidence wavered as his empire of cruelty began to crumble before everyone's eyes. Lena's gaze was steel, cold, sharp, unyielding, and in that charged silence, it became clear to all that true justice does not beg, does not flinch, and certainly does not bow. In Millstone District's Courtroom 3, where verdicts were almost predetermined, the air thick with resignation and defeat, today's defendant was Lena Carter, a 17-year-old black boy facing felony theft charges on evidence so flimsy it should have vanished in thin air. No fingerprints, no clear video footage, just the word of a store clerk and a report rooted more in routine suspicion than fact. Mitchell, a veteran cop with 20 years on the force who ruled his courtroom with silent intimidation rather than orders, regarded Aaron as just another stain to wipe off his city, even though the boy's record was clean except for a few school tardies. The prosecutor twisted those minor infractions into a fabricated history of behavioral problems. Facts blurred and stretched, objections were weak and ineffective, while the defense lawyer, trembling and defeated, barely fought at all, pleading for mercy as though Aaron's guilt was already accepted, without once mentioning the missing security footage or lack of evidence. Then Lena entered quietly, without fanfare, her black coat and folder under her arm, standing calmly beside the lawyers, her presence alone unsettling Mitchell and everyone else. When he confronted her, demanding to know who she thought she was, she ignored him, facing the judge instead, refusing to back down. Mitchell ordered her out, his voice tight and red-eyed, but she remained unmoved, her silence more powerful than any threat. As he reached toward her, trying to assert control, a chair crashed loudly behind him, the courtroom erupting as Mitchell's grip slipped. He shouted insults, calling her trash and accusing her of defending a worthless thief, but Lena's voice rang clear and unshaken. "You are insulting someone who has not been convicted. My brother Lena Carter is not yet 18. He has no record. He has not been sentenced. You have no right to call him a thief." Each word struck like a bell, breaking Mitchell's facade. For once, he was speechless, faced with a truth he had no script for. Someone who wouldn't bow, wouldn't rage, but simply stood firm against injustice. It happened like something out of a nightmare, sudden, brutal, and absolutely real. Without a word of warning, Mitchell snapped and drove his boot into her chest. Lena hit the floor hard, the breath knocked from her lungs, papers flying through, the air like shattered truths scattering across the courtroom. But she didn't scream. She didn't curse. She didn't give him the satisfaction of pain or fear. Instead, she moved with a quiet dignity, rising slowly, piece by piece, in a silence so deep it swallowed the room. And in that moment, time seemed to freeze. No one knew what to do. The courtroom, once controlled by Mitchell's presence like a steel trap, now sat stunned, witnessing something shift. Mitchell stood tall, as he always did, expecting the room to fall back into fearful silence. But this silence had changed. It wasn't respect, it was revulsion. Someone had their phone out. Someone was recording. Lena adjusted her coat, gathered her scattered papers, and looked him directly in the eye. "If this is how you act in a courtroom," she said calmly, clearly, "I wonder what you do where there are no cameras, no witnesses." Her voice didn't shake. Her words cut through the tension like a scalpel. No one answered. The judge, silent until now, looked at Mitchell, not as an officer of the law, but as a man who had just crossed a line too far. And then Lena spoke. Again, never raising her voice, never grandstanding. "My name is Lena Carter. I was sworn in as chief of police this morning. I am suspending this officer for public abuse of power." The room shifted. The ground felt different. Mitchell wasn't feared anymore. He wasn't untouchable. The curtain had fallen, and all that was left was a man exposed for what he was. Hours later, the video of the assault went viral. Some tried to defend him, clinging to their version of order. But many more finally saw what had always been there. Hashtags surged, old complaints resurfaced, memes mocked his authority, and, suddenly, the badge wasn't enough to shield him. Lena didn't stop. She ordered a full review of every complaint linked to Mitchell in the past 12 years. Patterns emerged. A timeline of unchecked power. A system that praised him every time someone else had tried and failed to speak out. And now, one by one, those buried stories clawed their way back into the light. Coerced confessions. Threats. Victims who were dismissed simply because they weren't believed. The weight of years now dragged his name down. And then came Kevin Simmons, just 16, but with a truth that mattered. He'd seen the real thief. Watched Lena Carter, the accused boy, chase the actual criminal and return the stolen watch. Until that moment, Kevin had stayed quiet, thinking adults would fix it. But Lena's stand sparked something in him. He spoke up. And with his testimony, paired with a newly recovered blurry security video, Aaron's name was cleared. This time, when Aaron stood in court, the gallery was full. The press, the public, the people Mitchell once silenced. Everyone watched. And the truth poured out, piece by piece, validated not just by evidence, but by conscience. The victim confirmed it. Was Aaron who had returned the item. Mitchell's version of events, built on fear and assumption, shattered. For days afterward, Lena faced backlash, threats, rumors, attacks on her name. But she didn't stop. She didn't want fame. She wasn't chasing legacy. She was simply doing what no one before her had dared, putting power under the microscope. She launched a civilian review board. She reopened closed files. She took justice out of locked rooms and handed it back to the people who'd been left voiceless for too long. No spotlights, no slogans. Just the quiet, relentless force of someone who refused to look away. Every complaint was reviewed. Every report re-examined. And Millstone began to change. Slowly, painfully, honestly, new systems were put in place. Transparency replaced secrecy, and fear no longer ruled the room. In the end, Malik Mitchell was arrested in silence. No press conference, no police salutes, just a knock at his door and a pair of cuffs he used to wield. No one called him sir. No one stood up for him. His empire didn't collapse from outside pressure. It fell because the truth, long denied, had finally found its voice. Alone in his cell, stripped of his badge and his pride, Mitchell stared into the mirror, and somewhere in the back of his mind, Lena's voice echoed, "Who are you now, without the badge?" He couldn't answer, not really, because in the end, justice isn't about one hero or one villain or even one viral video. It's about what a community chooses to do when it's finally forced to see itself, when the silence breaks and the masks fall away, and all that's left is your truth, your voice, your choice. So I ask you, if your city had to face itself, no more lies, no more denial, what side would you be on? Would you protect the powerful, or finally stand for the forgotten? Yes, this happened in Millstone, but it could happen anywhere. And now, it's your turn. Speak up. What does justice mean where you live? Does it still mean silence?